First prompt, scene analysis. So I watched every movie either in my bed or at my desk. I watched every movie by myself besides Rear Window, which I watched with one of my friends. Most of the movies I talked throughout, especially when I was watching Chinatown, uh, I was talking out loud a lot, trying to figure out what's happening. And at the end, the ending really shocked me, so saying a lot of stuff out loud. I watched Citizen Kane and Singing in the Rain in multiple viewings. I think the older movies were kind of harder to get through in one sitting, at least for me. I didn't take any notes, but I tried to do all the work for the films right after I watched them, or at least most of the work, so I had my initial impressions down. Citizen Kane, Chinatown, The Graduate, and Little Miss Sunshine all lingered in my head for a while. I think because of the phenomenal characters. I think those movies had the best characters from the movies we watched. I watched every movie digitally, so they're all right at my fingertips, which is definitely a modern luxury. And I'm also able to watch from the comfort of my home, so I don't have to go to a theater to watch it. And I think in a theater you feel compelled to laugh a lot, even if you don't find something funny if the audience laughs. And I think vice versa, because sometimes when I'm watching a movie and I think something's funny and no one else does, it's a little embarrassing to laugh at it. But prompt two. I thought the screenwriting and adaptation PowerPoint was interesting. I think adapting a screenplay seems like it's always a tall task, and The Graduate kind of surprised me that it was adapted because the plot is so seamless for film. And I think the score that Simon and Garfunkel composed for the movie goes to show how powerful using an artist specifically for a movie can be, like the PowerPoint says. I think how film directors can manipulate space is very intriguing. The PowerPoint talks about space in film being totally different than space in theater. I think films like Rear Window and Little Miss Sunshine do an excellent job at using their space to narrow the audience's viewpoint and hyper focus on things. Rear Window has a lot of great POV shots, which obviously you can't do in other mediums. And Little Miss Sunshine uses perfect space perfectly. Like in the family dinner scene, you can see all the characters laid out and how they act, and in the van throughout the movie, um, you can see how the characters play off each other. And sometimes the camera shows only one part of the car or the whole car, and it's great to see everyone's reaction or only a limited viewpoint. And the next PowerPoint I found compelling was the black comedy realism and stylization presentation. I've always been fascinated by different directors' idiosyncrasies. I think it's great to be able to watch a film and instantly know who the director is by their style and the cinematography. And I think no director embodies this mentality more than Quentin Tarantino. And as the presentation demonstrates, his snappy dialogue, dark humor, bombastic set pieces really put him apart from other directors, and that really comes out in his films. Prompt four. A few of the films really stood out to me, like The Graduate, Chinatown, and Citizen Kane. But the film I want to discuss is 21 Grams. Cognitively, this film really changed my way of thinking about grief and drug addiction. Jack's character in particular is very compelling for me. I think such a morally gray character like him is very refreshing to see. The way the film's constructed really taught me a lot about non-linear storytelling and filmmaking, and I was very impressed with it. I was definitely disturbed by Jack's hit and run and the fallout that ensues. It's a little difficult to break this down into one scene because of the non-chronological structure and how the film jumps around a lot, but basically Jack has just gotten out of prison and he's found religion, and that's helped save him, and he even wins a truck in a lottery that he thinks God has gifted him. He has a wife and two children, and it seems like he's finally catching a break in his life, and his friends are even throwing a party for him. All this comes crashing down, though, when he accidentally runs over and kills a man and his two children while driving his truck. So these characters end up being the husband and daughters of one of the other characters, Christina, and this is the event that ends up inextricably linking all of their lives together. It also ends up giving a different character, Paul, a new heart, and this is really what the catalyst for what ties these three characters' lives together. Um, I think this scene is so disturbing and stuck with me because Jack is faced with such a moral dilemma when he ends up fleeing the scene, and it brings up the question on how he and the people he's affected could possibly move on with their lives after such a gruesome incident. Prompt 5. So the scene I'd like to discuss is from The Graduate, and it's the bedroom scene with Mrs. Robinson and Ben at the hotel. I chose the scene because I think it stands out as the deepest glimpse into Mrs. Robinson's character that we get, and it's a very sad scene among many comedic scenes if you really think about it. Um, I want to look at it narratively. So Ben is a young, fresh out of college man who seemingly has a life of luxury and happiness ahead of him. His parents are wealthy, and he can put his degree to use whatever he wants to. But instead of feeling on top of the world like he should feel, he is hopelessly depressed and aimless at best. Mrs. Robinson, on the other hand, is on the kind of the other side of the same coin. She's already lived a lot of her life of luxury and comfort, and she's very entrenched into her decisions more than Ben is. And despite their differences, the two characters are kind of perfectly imperfect for each other at this moment in their lives. By this point in the film, Ben and Mrs. Robinson have been meeting for sex repeatedly, but this scene really ushers in the second act. And at the scene's onset, it appears to be another routine encounter, but Ben has a rare moment of clarity and attempts to connect with Mrs. Robinson on a deeper level. And his eagerness to discuss anything at all contrasts with Mrs. Robinson's curt responses and preference for silence. When they settle on art, her disinterest becomes apparent, and she says she knows nothing about it, even though she brought it up. Ironically, while she uses the hotel as an escape, their conversation circles back to the life that she wants to forget, if only for a little while. Eventually, they get back to the topic of college, which Ben was initially dismissive of, but now that he has a connection and he's got Mrs. Robinson talking, he wants to talk about it. She then reveals that she actually majored in art during college, which Ben just kind of glosses over, and he doesn't understand why she would want to talk about it. But this issue holds a deeper, unspoken sadness for Mrs. Robinson, and Ben quickly moves on, unaware of her sad response. And only the audience, I love this because only the audience can see her face and understand the weight of this revelation as she just stares away from Ben with kind of a melancholic expression that only we can see. She reveals that she married her husband not for love, but because she was pregnant. Ben's innocence is highlighted as he takes a comedically painful amount of time to decipher this. And when the conversation turns to her daughter, Mrs. Robinson forbids Ben from seeing her, frustrating him. I think this upsets him because he doesn't think of himself as a bad guy, and he can't think of a reason that he shouldn't be allowed to date her, even though the truth is he's sleeping with her mother. Even deeper subtextually, though, I think Mrs. Robinson doesn't want Ben to date her daughter because she doesn't want her daughter to end up like she did, a college student attached to a man she may not truly love and away from her intellectual pursuits. The scene ends with Ben about to storm out, incensed at Mrs. Robinson's rejection of him as a suitor, but ultimately he stays, realizing that despite the dysfunction of the relationship, it's the only meaningful thing in his life. I love this scene because it really encapsulates the inner and outer struggles of the character and the film's overarching theme of lacking purpose and losing what you once loved. Prompt 6. So I want to talk about Singing in the Rain. So this movie came out at a very important time in Hollywood's history. I think that the time period is unique because it gives a glimpse into how movies in the 50s were made, but the film itself is actually set in the late 20s. So as the PowerPoint states, it came out in the golden age of Hollywood where studios were making huge investments into films, and it was really a bustling industry. It also offers commentary on the death of the silent movie. The characters give a glimpse into how difficult the transition was and how it was really sink or swim in the industry. Characters like Don Lockwood were able to reinvent themselves, while an actress like Lena Lamont struggled mightily to keep her fame going. I think the scene that speaks the most to the era is the Broadway ballet. It emphasizes the deeply entrenched ties of the mob in Hollywood in the 20s and I think at that time as well. And if you wanted to be anyone, you had to associate with the mob in some way, like in nightclubs. It also details the struggles of someone trying to achieve stardom in Hollywood, as you really needed to know the right people or you couldn't make it. One of the texts for week 4 also mentions the star system, where young stars were signed to legally binding contracts by big studios and forced to act how the studios wanted. This can be seen in Don's forced relationship with Lena, where he doesn't really want to date her, but she wants to date him because the studio wants them to date. One last issue is the sexism of Hollywood. So Kathy's a strong female character who's originally dismissed by Don as a fan, and it's hard for him to fathom that a woman like her, a smart woman, would want a film career. I think this movie also utilizes color very well, which was also a symbol of the time period, as color hadn't been around for way too long when it came out, and it makes full use of the color palette. It's very vibrant. The issues of film covers are kind of a mixed bag in today's world. Things like transitioning from silent movies and not having color are issues that we're very far removed from, and it's not exactly relatable. The mob definitely does not have as much influence in Hollywood, but I feel that with as many studios having monopolies on things, basically like the superhero genre, it's hard for lesser known people to make it in Hollywood still. And sexism is obviously an ever pervasive issue. And you had stuff like the Me Too movement. That was a very big issue. But in today's world, female leads have never really had as many leading roles as they do today. So I think that's an issue that's kind of gone better.